January 17th meeting of the Lake Havasu City Airport Advisory Board. We start the meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Mrs. Lichtel, would you conduct a roll call, please?
Sure. Shannon Stebbins.
Here.
Lewis Worthy.
Here.
Dave McNary. Absent. Steve Huff.
Here.
Brian Schultz.
Here.
Jeff Sayer. Absent. Shannon Hicks.
Here.
Bill Boyer. Absent. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a call to the public. We have an open call to the public for citizens wishing to address the board on issues within the jurisdiction of the board. Your comments must be limited to 5 minutes or less. If you wish to address an item already on today's agenda, please wait until the item is announced for a public hearing. At the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual members of the board may respond to criticisms made by those who address the board, may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. However, board members cannot discuss or take legal action on matters not already on the agenda. Okay, with these rules, I'd like to open it up to anyone who'd like to address the board. Tom?
Good evening. Tom Stokely. I rent a hangar from the city, hangar number 74, for over 3 years now. I'm up in the north hangar area, kind of away from the main hangars where most of the T hangars are that are privately owned and some of the other city hangars, but there's 6 hangars up towards the top that are owned by the city, that the city built at some point in time. I'm requesting, since you want to develop that dirt lot there, which I think is around 2 acres, if I'm right, Steve, I'm requesting that we get a bathroom built up there. I found a perfect location next to water, next to electric, and about 150 feet from the sewer, which would just require trenching and putting in a sewer line that would reach that sewer. Currently, we're having to go way down the other way, and I think that in your development, future development of that area, that it would be a good add. I'm a general contractor, although I'm not commercially licensed. I think you could probably build that for under $30,000, trenching and everything. Okay, that was the first thing on my agenda. The second item I'd like to discuss, and if we can put that on for something to talk about future, I'd appreciate that. This afternoon, I swept a 4x4 area in front of my hangar. I had my hangar neighbor, Ryan Bluestone, there. He watched me. That's how much loose gravel came off. That's how much potentially can go into our props. Now, I know today we're going to have a discussion about our future or how we've come about fair market value with our hangars. And I feel like we are paying top dollar, and we know we're paying top dollar. And actually, I'm okay with it. This is not okay. All right, I brought this up several months ago, and we continue to hear nothing about making any repairs, any investment by the city. And I know this is not totally your part, okay? So, but one of these days, one of these big rocks are going to head into a prop, okay? You know, and it's pretty bad up there. And we know it. It's been on the list, but we can't seem to get any money for it. Okay, and I know we're in an area that's only 6 hangars. That once in an area that you want to develop with more hangars. But we can't have this. This is dangerous for us. I know another guy that's down below, he's out there picking up rocks, and he's in a good area of asphalt because his particular plane, his tire will kick a rock right up into his prop because he has a Canard aircraft. You know, and I know there needs to be a budget change in how we do business with the airport. And I know there's been a lot of people in the past that said, oh, this is a rich man's playground. I've heard these comments before. And you're probably right. But it's also builders like myself. I know several manufacturers that manufacture and ship their products around the country and some worldwide that create jobs, that create sales tax revenue. The people that work for them create sales tax. There's car dealership owners. There's, from average people that are just trying to love their hobby. Okay. But we do our part for the community too. And I think that the city needs to do their part to make this not a problem. So I don't know what you can do to stress that to the city, but I think at this point we need to, push the city to make the investment. And like I said, I'm personally willing to pay top dollar for my rents if I have a top dollar facility. All right, and thank you very much. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for your comments, Tom. Reference the comments, Steve, can we refer you to you, please, and maybe respond to them next month?
Yes, indeed.
Thanks. Anyone else want to address the board? Seeing none, we'll continue. The next item is approval of the November 15th, 2017 minutes, of which you all have a copy. Are there any additions or changes or amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
Motion to approve November's minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any opposed? Unanimously approved, Mrs. Luke. The next two items are communications announcements and airport supervisor's report. Both of them are Mr. Johnson's, the airport supervisor's report and upcoming airport events. I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Okay, I'll try to be brief here. Our ADOT FOD grant project plans have been approved by ADOT. Funding's available. The project should go to bid next month, and we believe construction will occur this summer. The electrical vault construction is underway. Current estimate for completion is May 2018. Right now we're in about a 3-week hiatus waiting for the vault and generator to be constructed. Taxiway alpha crack sealing, and some of this I'll talk about in a little bit later. And the runway taxiway connectors, application of rejuvenation projects, both will be scheduled around special airport uses this spring, and I do apologize for the misspelling here. I'm noticing quite a number of these. We'll share project details with tenants and airport businesses as we get closer to doing those. But again, they'll be scheduled, which is one of the reasons for the timelines around the Canadians who are showing up, the RV formation group that's showing up, so there won't be an impact. Hangar 24 Airfest show has been rescheduled for October 27th, 2018. Which shouldn't conflict with any of the other airport uses, I believe. Airport staff is going to be moving forward on cleaning up the car parking lot that we have, central area just to the north of Desert Skies, new big hangars. We have a number of issues with cars there that are not paying us for parking, so we'll be cleaning that up. D2 hangar development is moving forward. I believe plans should be submitted this week. I've been talking with the planning folks who are doing the categorical exemption for environmental. And as you all recall, everything we do at the airport now has to have a Cat X, everything, whether it's private or public. So we should have that in hand. City needs to sign it, and then it'll be sent off to the FAA. And the FAA is aware it's on the way, so that's all moving. We've begun city hangar inspections finally. Unfortunately, I'm not doing as many as I'd like, but a number of people have been advised, and we've started to notice a number of non-aviation things migrate off the airport. So that's finally moving along. We're working on a draft plan for replacement of the locator signs on the access road to the airport since they're old and faded. Grant application for the master plan update was submitted to the FAA in December. FAA will be coordinating additional grant funding for the project. We have about half the funding, and normally there are a number of airports that do not use their grant dollars, so they'll be gathering additional funds for us in that regard. The economic benefit analysis wasn't eligible for grant funding, but we've included it in the project anyway because of the importance of it that I think you've all indicated as well. Current guess is that the FAA will offer us a grant in July, August. Now, the one thing that could bollocks this is a government shutdown. And so it's anybody's guess. I'm still thinking August, but when you start throwing some of these unknowns in here, the timelines can shift a bit. ADOT grant for partial funding of the design part of the electrical vault's been closed out. All the paperwork's done on that. The ADOT grant for partial funding of the construction of the electrical vault was submitted, I think, December, so that's in. A portion of the central parking lot will be used this weekend by the Light Sport Flyers for operations off the Desert Skies FBO in connection with the local Balloon Fest that's going on at Windsor Park Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The airport's going to be placing a message on the AWAS and a NOTAM to the feds, the FAA, regarding the balloon operations, since they're only about 5 nautical miles just directly south of the airport. So just to get the word out to everybody. And if I have the chance, I'll print out a notice in that regard. The REALS, runway end identifier lights on runway 14 are failing. We've patched them together temporarily, so it's an intermittent fail at this point. The manufacturer no longer produces the parts, and as of January this year, will no longer support the parts. We believe we can order the parts and jury rig one of these together, but what we are going to do is in the CIP that we revise this year, we're going to add replacing the reels for both runway 14 and 32, that's 4 lights, and add those into a PAPI replacement that we already have listed for runway 32. So it'll be an electrical project, we'll just add it in, and that's probably about 2 or 3 years out, and that's ADOT funded. In regards to airport events, we have the Royal Canadians coming back January 20th for 2 weeks. We have the RV group that was here last year for formation training February 9th through the 11th. The Royal Canadians come back on February 17th and exit on the 4th. Embry-Riddle flight training will be out at the airport March 23rd through the 25th. And then Hangar 24 with their Airfest on the 27th. Any questions?
Any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman, Steve, the lights that you mentioned, will they last 3 years if you're able to put them together?
We pride ourselves in 1930s baling wire repairs, so one way or t'other, whether we can repair them or we can find an airport that's replaced their old ones and have surplus, we'll make them last.
Thank you.
Do you have a comment, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I just wanted to tag on to Steve's supervisor report, just to add that we did take the city manager out on or I had the privilege of being with him for 3.5 hours on a whirlwind 70-mile tour of Lake Havasu City from north to south. Did include a drive through by the airport, and he had just mentioned too, I pointed out Hangar 24, and he mentioned he had eaten a hamburger there the day before, so he is out and getting about and looking at things. And one of the items that I would throw out for the airport board would be, obviously he's only been on board 2 weeks, but sometime maybe in February, March, it probably would be nice to have an informal airport board meeting out at the location for maybe 30 minutes, just a meet and greet, try not to ambush them too much, and then possibly talk with the FBOs about going for 30 minutes to both of the FBOs, and we would love to have the vice mayor and the airport board chairman kind of tag along for that discussion, because I think we can probably wrangle an hour and a half or 2 hours. I don't know that I'll ever be able to trick them into driving with me for 3.5 hours and 70 miles, but I think that would be something we want to kind of look for an upcoming discussion maybe in the next month or two. Thank you.
Yeah, reference the suggestion that we have an airport board meeting. Arizona open meeting law doesn't allow us to do that. However, a couple or 3 members of the board, I'm sure, would be happy to take him on a tour along with the airport staff. Just one question on the airport master plan. We said that we had the the economic impact, which we agreed was very, there was also commercial air service that was left out that we had a request to put in to that. What was done with that?
It was left in.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Find my. Okay, the first public hearing is a presentation regarding the rate determination for city hangars from our Admin Services Department. Welcome.
Thank you. Tabitha Miller, Administrative Services Director, and I have Sandy McCormick, our Senior Accountant, sitting next to me. This is probably going to be fairly informal. We're certainly willing to answer any questions you have, but I didn't want to spend too much time going through the city's process for setting fees other than the presentations that is in here, because I'm not sure it's specific to the process for hangars, because that's a little bit different on how we've handled that through time. But I'll go kind of generally through what the city does, and again, I'm happy to answer questions that we can. So we included 2 items in your packet. One was sort of a modified, a very general introduction PowerPoint presentation on the process we go through, and the second sheet is actually the master fee schedule, and we pulled out just the airport fees. And the nice thing about the master fee schedule, on the last 2 pages, it's kind of a long, complicated. Oh, yours is even smaller and harder to read. Sorry about the very, very small print. But this actually provides kind of a good history on how the airport fees have been handled historically, or at least in our time involved in this process. I'm going to actually start on the right-hand side and kind of work back from the columns. In 2018, January 1st of this year, we did update, overall we updated the city's fee schedule. For the most part, for the airport, we did not change those from the previous year, and that happened to be because we had a request by the department when we started looking at the fees that they felt like, compared to other airports in the region, we were already sort of at the high end, and we didn't want to increase those above that level. So those have stayed the same for the most part. If you go back to what happened in 2016 and 2017, we simply took the fees that had been in place in 2015 and added just a cost of living. It was 1% for 2017. In 2018, it was a 2.4% cost of living, and that was simply tied to the CPI. And it was an easy way to try to keep city fees as a whole basically up with inflation. And that's been a problem in the past. The city, as you can see from this schedule, we didn't do anything. If you look at the middle column, date last revised, 2011 had been the last time until 2016 that the city had addressed any of the city fees. So not just airport fees, but as a whole. So we had a 5-year period of time that fees did not change. This caused us issues elsewhere in the city in that we had really kind of fallen behind our cost of providing the services. And so that process in 2016, it actually started in early 2015, and it was before I was even with the city. But Sandy went through and met with most of the departments. They went through a pretty complicated process of looking at the supplies, the services, and the staff time that went into providing services. I realize it's a little different for the airport, and you'll notice one of the things, if you go one column over from that 2011 date to the reasonable cost to be recovered, almost all of your airport fees are either set at market rate or they're set with a rate study. And I know that the rate study was done many years ago. In fact, we even went to find a copy of it and don't even have a copy. It's that old. So those fees have been in place for,
I think around 2007.
2007, you might know, Steve.
2005, and I will get you a copy of the report.
I'm not sure it's going to be hugely useful to us today, but we appreciate that.
Yeah, you'll have the history if nothing else.
Okay. So even the 2011, they would have been built on a report that's now almost 15 years old. Market rates mean that at some point in time, the market rate was established, and again, we've simply kind of followed through with that, keeping rates the same this last year. Part of the process that Sandy goes through when we initially start looking at the fees, and this starts in May or June of every year, is sending out the current fees to each department and trying to get some feedback on what do we need to address, what should we look at closely, are there inequities that the department believes are in the fees, and we do take those into account. It's part of the reason that these fees were not increased this year, was because I know that you had done at least a informal look at those other entities, and we said, okay, we need to stay there. But again, yours are a little different in that it's a little harder on hangar fees to do the same things we do with other departments. For example, our recreation department is pretty easy to look at programs. We go in and we say, okay, what are the costs of the materials that go into providing those services? We go through staff. We say, okay, there's this many staff people spend this much time. We look at the ongoing maintenance of the pool, those sorts of things, and calculate it. That's not really something that the city has done for the airport, as you can see, because of the way the fees have been established. And again, that may be something that we want to look at going forward. It sounds like this is an area that you do want to address, and we're certainly open to that. And I guess that's kind of, I'm asking for a little direction on what else you have questions on at this point.
I think what we were hoping to have answered, just based on the informal analysis that we did at other airports, Deer Valley is 22 cents a square foot per hangar space. We're 28 cents a square feet. Other people around this area are as low as 16 cents a square foot. So we're trying to figure out where the disparity exists and how our market rates are determined that cause us to be 25%, 23% more expensive than Phoenix.
And go ahead.
And I think one of the reasons for that was alluded to indirectly in regards to that report done in 2005, which, to be liberal about it, was somewhat unique. And I think that's where this all stemmed from. Basically, the hangar rates, other than the CPIs for the last few years, were pretty much established at that point in time based on that study. Needless to say, I'm not a fan of that report, but I think that's where the foundation for this was. At the time, I don't believe there was an airport board. It was in hiatus for a few years. And so I think this, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe it went probably directly to the city council, and I think it was adopted. The initial fees in 2006 is what I've come to see.
Somewhere in the 2000s.
So I think that's where the basis for this came from. But other than the increases that you see here in the last few years, those rates pretty much remained in place for quite a number of years.
Yeah, unfortunately, it still didn't answer the question of why it's 22 cents a square foot in Phoenix and 28 here. I think that was the question that came up, and I was hoping that you could share how we determine the market rates, but apparently we haven't determined the market rates.
No, I think the problem is, yes, they were determined in 2004, and we have built upon them. And even the fees you have here, keep in mind, because we didn't do the increase this year, there's only a 1% increase from 2011 to 2018 built in. So obviously, we are simply building on history.
Any other comments?
Yes, sir. Because of circumstances, I just moved my aircraft up to North Las Vegas Airport. I can't talk cents per square foot because I'm doing a shade hangar, but it's $100 a month, and I was paying 167 here. So I think we're way, like the gentleman there said, way at the top of the rack there, and we're still increasing. I would just ask why.
If I may, this year we recognized the rates when we were going through a full rate analysis through the city, and we kept the rates the same. When Tabitha went through, really the rates have not been increased since 2011, although there was the slight one from 16 to 17. If it wasn't to the whole dollar, it stayed the same. And many of these fees you can see on the attached chart, they did not increase at all. So we recognize that there's an issue, and that's why we haven't increased them. But I think with some of the things we're going to be doing with the city, with the airport master plan, and some of these questions will be answered. Do we have plans in place to do a new rate study, to update the rate study from '05?
We don't, but we could do that.
And I think that's the logical takeaway from this discussion. We can get with finance, we can have that discussion about what level of rate study we want to go to. Obviously, we could pay a lot of money for have a consultant do that, and so that would be the high end of the discussion. I'm not suggesting that, but I mean, that would be one method, because if I'm not mistaken, I think that the consultant did the rate study in 2004, so that was a, paid for study. We could work with finance and see if there's other options, and that would be something that we would have. The process has been deferred till August, so we have a little bit of time in between then and now and then to look through that process. And again, obviously, we're hearing the feedback from the board that that's something that they would like us to do.
Well, this is based on the feedback that we're hearing
Yes.
from the public. This is public process.
And we would, from our standpoint, and certainly this group can recommend something different, based on the cost, the revenues that we're talking about, and the fact that there's no indication that we're well below and we're trying to justify increasing our rates. We're looking at potentially something going the other way. We would certainly recommend that it be done at the staff level, just to save, we're talking as much as $40,000 or $50,000. And, that doesn't seem like a justified cost. There's lots of other things it sounds like folks would want done at the airport rather than a formal fee review.
I'm not sure that the board thought we would reduce the rates. I think we were just trying to figure out how we got to where we're at. And do we have an explanation for the difference between what should be a high market area in Phoenix and here, which should not be quite as much, I would think.
And I can give a little bit of that information, because even though the airport wasn't necessarily a part of Public Works always, and I've been paying attention, the reality of it is I think there's been a shift in the city's position on the airport, and it's occurred over time. For a long time, there was a plan for a hangar update, and I'm sorry, not a hangar, terminal update, and that was a part of the master plan. And then there was a shift, for commercial service was an important part of the process. And then for a long time, I think there became a goal to have the airport, basically pay for itself. I mean, it is an enterprise fund, but so there was a tendency for the emphasis to be on higher fees and part of those processes, and as all of that's going through, there's also been a staffing change. There was a few more people out there at the airport, and so we haven't really ever corrected up for that. And I think that's a part of the discussion staff can have, as well as with the city manager, and see where we want to go and how we want to do things. I can tell you that as far as airport maintenance, if it wasn't going to be funded by a grant, we really were not expending any city funds directly at the airport, and so that's kind of been a change this year. We're looking at, we're going to expend about $50,000 or $60,000. We've got good news back on the mastic. It came in below budget, so we should be able to mastic all of the larger cracks, including some of the areas on taxiway C. So that's a change in dynamics and direction from the previous city manager. Started that ball rolling about 6 months ago, and we're planning on continuing that. So,
And I can add a little bit to that as well. The study which I read when I first came here, and had a tenant tell me his value of it, which I agreed with him, which floored him, and having reread it, part of it was what Mark was saying, which was a major difference in roles at that point in time. We still had air service. The premise back in 2005 was that eventually we'd have MD-80s and 737s. The airports that were compared, and again, as you all know, I'm sort of an airport techno geek, were places like Yuma, Scottsdale. I mean, clearly not in our class. And the market rates which came from that, which were used in partially used in these initial rates, equated to that as well. So and there wasn't a focus in detail on the services that we offered, the infrastructure we had. Like, we don't have a tower. Many of these other places had towers. Many of them had airline service, large airline service, like Bullhead with their gambling charters. And so, and there was a premise that we were a resort airport, and we are sort of, but we're not really. And so the comparisons, in my opinion, were somewhat flawed. And if we go through this dynamic of a rate study, that would probably be one of the things, at least in my opinion, where we get closer to apples and apples, because clearly we were grapes and cranberries and we were all over the place.
Now, I will tell you the downside to this discussion. If the rate study comes back and, you know, it recommends or recognizes lower fees, obviously that is a revenue cut, and then we'll have to address that. Now, luckily, it's not probably as much of a revenue cut related to the city because, you know, 25 city hangars, you know, is not a significant amount of huge money compared to $4 or $5 million budgets. But again, I think that's the process that we can go through, and we'll be happy to make that as transparent as possible and go through there. And luckily, Steve gets to say that that was previously done before he was here, and I get to say the same thing, and it wasn't in charge. So, but we will, you know, make that happen and go down that. The only one that we can blame is Sandy.
And I would add, and this isn't a blame thing for Sandy either, I would add one other piece to that, and I think you all know this, everybody in the room. We have one of the cleanest and nicest airports around. So I think there's a piece to that as well. And it's just sort of a comparison dynamic of there's some other facilities you can go into, and as Mr. Tom there showed us with the FOD, you'll find FOD like that. You'll find cracks that a small child could fall in and you'd never see them again. We're not in that class. And so, I mean, there's a lot of comparison here that we need to do.
This is a public hearing. I'd like to open up for members of the audience to address the board on this issue and give us your opinions. Seeing none, are there any more comments? My suggestion would be that that we go down the road of looking at the rates and comparisons, and I'm not suggesting that we roll the rates back, but perhaps we can figure out some way to direct invest that money into, at least come up with a plan for those funds. So maybe we can put that on a future agenda to keep going. I think the big question that for the public process that we had was to figure out how we came to be at 28 cents a square foot, which appeared to be high, which may not be high, rather than just complaining about the total expense of the hangars. I think Mr. Stokely said it well, that not too many people are complaining about the total amount that they're paying to store their aircraft in a hangar. What they would like to see is more things that are directly around their hangars taking care of some of the issues that they have.
And I would add one more piece to this. We all lived through the economic reset, as I'm going to call it, recently. And initially, some of our FBOs back in 1998 and 2002, I think, the base rate on those long-term agreements was 28 cents a square foot, which at that time, I gather, maybe because of this rate study, was adequate. In doing an appraisal roughly 4 or 5 years ago with a professional that we paid on the North Ramp, which Mr. Stokely was mentioning, I believe the number he came up with at that time, looking at comparable airports, was 16 to 17 cents a square foot.
For dirt or for a completed
That was
facility?
for dirt, yeah, bare dirt. So in a sense, industry-wide, things sort of backed up a bit.
The argument on the other side of that coin is that we have a waiting list for hangars. So we have to weigh both of that in the public interest. I'm somewhat surprised that we don't have any public comment, but well, not Mr. Stokely.
First off, Tom Stokely. First off, it makes me feel good that we have not done anything through this process for 13 years. So, or 14 years. So, you know, because it's evident, you know, I mean, we're so much more money. You know, with this the whole process of reducing hanger rates, I don't think as much important as, to me, saying, okay, it should be down here. We're going to take this money and invest it extra into it. Okay, that's for me. I make enough money to afford it. Most of the people I know, there's a few that would like $100 off a month, but you know, I just put a new engine in my plane. It's $47,000. I can afford the $419. Okay. Furthermore, I want a nice facility. We're out there a lot. We hang out there a lot. We're messing with our planes, you know, and a nice facility. And Hangar 24 has been a great ad. And I feel like we can do something and work together and make this happen and make it a positive thing. The 17 cents a square foot, that the number you're using now for the dirt across the street, I kind of penciled it out. Unless somebody's renting a big jet hangar, it doesn't pencil. For general aviation guys that want hangars, to release that dirt for 17 cents a square foot, that's dirt cost. Okay, that runs on a 40 by 42 hangar, approximately $283. Okay, if I'm renting for $419, I can't build that hangar and turn around and lease it to somebody at $419 and make any money. So I believe that number at 17 cents is high for general aviation. Now, maybe some big jet, things like that, but that doesn't solve the problem. And the whole list of people, 9 out of 10 on that list, are general aviation. You know, small, single engine, maybe twin, that wants a standard size hangar. So I really think you need to reevaluate those numbers, because the amount of space we have left is getting thin. You know, with Craig building his hangars down there, what that dirt section there, I know there's some land over on the other side, but it's really not connected. It's down a hill and things like that. Which direction do you want that to go? Do you want that to be general aviation, or are we just going to go after the big jet traffic and general aviation gets to park outside? Okay, thank you very much.
Almost every question that you brought up gets handled by the airport, the plan, the master plan that's coming up. So I think it's important that we talk about these and provide the public process for it. I think it'd be important to take a look at a rate study and see where we actually are on dirt, and notwithstanding just hangars, just in general. Because if you can't put up a hangar and get a return on investment over 30 years, then there's a problem with development, and we would like to see development at the airport. So my suggestion is that we go forward and just take a look at the rates and see where we're at, and then also inject some of this into the master planning that we're paying a consultant to do, and with help from the FAA, and see what it all comes. I think this is not a place to solve anything, but a place to ask questions that we look for long-term answers, not short-term fixes.
So, Mr. Chairman, since it is on the agenda, we can give direction and make a recommendation as a board so that there's formal action, so it doesn't have to be on the agenda reoccurring month after month, and just comes back when city staff has the report for the board.
Thank you. Would anybody like to make a motion that we ask staff to proceed with a rate study encompassing not only hangar rates, but any fees that are out of line at the airport?
We'll make a motion that we definitely need to have them,
Do we have a
the
second?
staff do it though.
No, I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Mr. Chief, for the guidance. Okay, the next item is an update regarding airport construction progress. Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. The update regarding airport construction projects, and this is on as a public hearing so that anyone in the audience can also ask questions, but this would be your item, Steve.
Okay, the rejuvenator for the runway connectors, this ties back to the pavement maintenance project we had done a few years ago by the state, which frankly was a project from Hades. I would have used another word, but I'll be nice. We've gotten 3 quotes for Rejuvenator application. We've settled on a contractor. They've been selected. They've had prior experience in doing this on airfields. We're going to do the application at 2 different times because it's going to encompass closures of 4 days a pop for 2 connectors or 3 connectors at a time. It'll of course be noted, and we'll put something on the AWAS. Right now, the best guess is, unless the weather gets stranger, is that we'll probably do this in mid to late March after the Royal Canadians have exited the area. But again, it'll be weather depending, and as soon as things start to firm up a little bit, I'll be letting all the FBOs know. We'll put notices out for tenants, so it'll be less of a surprise, and we can all plan around it. Crack sealing for Alpha Taxiway, Mr. Clark outlined that. We have somebody selected. It appears to be under what we thought it was going to cost. We're going to do the entire length of Alpha Taxiway, so some of it's those man-eating cracks that Mr. Stokely was mentioning at the north end, and then some of the man-eaters we have on Charlie Taxiway as well, and then the small stuff too. And again, we'll be putting notices out, working with the FBOs and tenants in regards to that. The one nice thing about that project is it can probably be done in 2 or 3 days and at off hours to where it's less of an impact on our users. Because once it's down, it's set. And again, I don't think weather-wise we'll have to wait. It's just these special uses to not impact them. The electrical vault, the notice to proceed was January 3rd. We began working on that. All of you at the airport noticed 2 spots across Taxiway Alpha and Bravo where we ended up putting in conduit and some new vaults. Right now we're in about a 2-month break as the electrical vault and generator are built. We'll resume about mid-March. We shouldn't have any additional impacts on the airport operations other than an hour or 2 once they turn the power off, turn the power on. But beyond that, there should be no issues out on the airfield per se. Foreign object debris and drainage project. Again, ADOT has approved the plans. We're shooting for January, February to go to bid. Again, this is ADOT 90% funded, so we don't have to depend on the federal government whether they're operating or not in that regard. We think that construction will be about mid-year or this summer. This will include runway closures. And again, once we go to bid, we have some decent bids. We'll have an idea of schedules and what timelines that's going to take. Right now, I don't know if we're talking about runway closures at night, off hours, or what. But again, this one's going to be kind of a stinker because we'll be between Alpha Taxiway, runway 14 at the north end, and because we're in safety areas, we will have to close the runway. And of course, that's during the hot time of the year, which means that even shortening things up is not going to be an option for many of our users because of the air density. The central parking lot that I was mentioning in regards to cleaning it up from a standpoint of who's parking out there, we'll have a contractor probably coming in the next couple of weeks, and we'll seal the majority of the cracks that are out there. Again, the pavement's toast, so this doesn't mean that we're going to lengthen the lifespan of the pavement, but it needs to be cleaned up. And so, and it's part of our reinvestment in the facility that was outlined earlier. Any questions?
Any questions or comments? Akudo, I was at the airport a lot during this construction that took place, and the contractor that did the construction did a first-class job as far as escorting vehicles on and off and through the gates, and they actually followed the rules. I was heartened for that. This construction project is managed by CIP, is that correct?
CID.
CID? Yeah. Were they out at all?
No, they weren't. I basically was as I have been in the past, project managing on my own. So yeah, no, and the contractor, they are, to use an old term, the bee's knees. That means groovy or whatever, but sort of 1910 version. No, they are so far, knock on wood. Hopefully, I'm not cursing the project. Their quality, and we sat down quite a lot, and before problems could become problems, we basically made them non-problems. But yeah, they seem to be so far excellent.
Well, from my standpoint as a user, it seemed to be easy to work around. They were ahead of schedule, so I was heartened. This is a public hearing. I'd like to open it up for any member of the audience that'd like to make a comment. Seeing none, we'll move on to review policies for parking on the airport, and that's also Mr. Johnson.
We've gone through our records. It's been, as you know, we've had some staff changes here the last few years. And we're finding in the records of the parking lot that we have cars out there that don't have permits. We're finding that there's confusion in regards to who owns the lot. There's no confusion on my part, but there appears to be confusion with some of our tenants. So that all being said, and we've noticed occasionally RVs out there that aren't connected to an airport event. A semi-truck that was out there for about a month that shouldn't have been. So we're in the process of reviewing our records, policies, and practices. We're finding inconsistencies, and what we're suggesting is a small committee of staff and maybe an airport board member to go through reviewing all of these, and then adjust, if needed, any of the regulations we currently have for non-flying vehicles that are on city-controlled properties on the airport.
And just a little caveat too, as a small town gets larger, we used to have the police department tow enforcement, and one of the little things that we've discovered over the years is they don't really have any authority on private or non-right-of-way property. So if it just, even though it's roads out there or the airport, it requires us to really go through the process of having a towing company and be posted, because it isn't a enforcement issue that is written into the Arizona statute. So those are some of the issues that we just have to clean up as we go through the process and determine how we want to handle that. Do we want to post it, camel, everybody's seen the little camel towing signs or whatever in the swap meet. So we're going to have to probably go down that road, but it's in an emergency. If something was critical, obviously we can get it out of there, but obviously these issues are not super critical, but that is one of the little nuances that we have to address. So.
As part of the city ordinances that are published as the airport operating regulations, beginning at 1108.320 and going on through to, looks like 1108.350, it is devoted to parking. And so certainly all the authority that you need is already in place to have anything towed. The section on motorhomes, boats, and recreational vehicles, it says, shall not be stored anywhere on the airport unless in accordance with the city-approved lease. I'm not aware of any city-approved leases for the storage of boats or recreational vehicles. And it goes on to say that it has to be approved by you. So 2 months ago, I believe, we passed a resolution supporting your endeavors in all these. So if you're asking for additional help, I'm sure we're happy to provide that as well. As I understand, that's what you're asking for.
That is correct, yeah. And that way you're up to speed, as Mr. Clark was alluding to in regards to the fact that the parking lot out there is not a right-of-way. And so different state regulations apply, which means at the very least signage, but probably review of all this is not a bad thing, especially given the hangar inspections and the fact we've had a truck parked out there, which is now gone. The fact that no leases that I've had handed, that I've seen anyway, records, where we've allowed RVs. And it's not a major problem, but it's something to clean up.
This is a public hearing. Would anybody like to make a comment? Seeing none, I entertain a motion from the board to appoint a committee of 2 board members to work with Mr. Johnson on parking issues at the airport.
I don't think anybody wants to do it.
Sure.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, we're looking
Put a
for the
committee
motion
together.
to appoint. Second?
I second it.
Anyone opposed? Okay, it carries. As far as the committee, does anybody want to volunteer? I'd be happy to. Since I'm at the airport all the time and retired, I'd be happy to be out there, but there are a lot of people here who are working.
I'll help you.
Okay. So if that's acceptable to the members of the board, Mrs. Hicks and I will work with Mr. Johnson. We'll come back to the board with a recommendation. But you already have the resolution of the board supporting your endeavors with the parking violations and whatever we need to do to help you further the implementation of this. I'm certainly willing to do that. I think that concludes our public hearings. The next item is future agenda items. I poll the board members, or anyone here that would like to see something on a future agenda? Just taking notes, I have a couple of things. I'd like to put the north ramp for a public hearing on a future agenda, and we'll go up there and in furtherance of what Mr. Stokely brought up and do a survey on FOD and see what we can do, see what we can come up with to at least mitigate some of the issues up there. And also a public hearing and discussion on how we go about putting a bathroom facility in, and do we need a bathroom facility? I don't think it's pretty much a known fact that there is no bathroom facility up there, and they have to go a long ways to get to one. So I'm sure that's not something we won't support, but the question is, how do we pay for it and how do we move forward? Do we have any other recommendations for future agenda items? The next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, February 21st, 2018 at 5:30 in this room. I would look for a motion to adjourn, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn a meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, this meeting is adjourned.